Good morning, everyone. In today's video, I'm going to tell you about the male characters in my second book, Seven Sisters, Overland Trek. Now, as you remember in the first book, it took place on the ocean, and we had a conflict with the sailors and the crew and the captain. And of course, the ocean was quite played a big role in this whole book. But once they got to New York City, they landed on the docks, and they were divided into two groups because, and they lost quite a few right there because people didn't have enough money to go on farther until they stayed and earned some more money. But anyway, so they divided them into two groups and put them on a couple of steamships. And they sent them up the Hudson River to Albany, New York. Now, the reason they didn't go straight across was because the Civil War was raging. And there were skirmishes and battles all over the eastern United States. So the church leaders decided that for safety's sake, they would send them north. And so they got on their steamship and went up north. And then once they got to Albany, they were able to connect with trains, and they were able to go straight across New York over to Niagara Falls. There they crossed Niagara Falls on a suspension bridge, which was kind of exciting at the time, and went into Canada and rode, traveled for many miles through Canada. And they got to the Great Lakes, and then they crossed down back into the United States, down past Chicago, down to Quincy, Illinois, and there they crossed the Mississippi River on a ferry boat. And then once they got on the other side, they were able to catch a train again to go across Missouri. Then they got to the Missouri River, and they had to do the steamships up till they got to Florence, Nebraska, which was their goal for the second leg of their trip. Well, once they got to New York and divided up, they got some new people that joined them. And one particular family had a 14-year-old son, and just the same age as Matthew Geddes and the twins, playmates and so forth. So they were excited to get him. The thing about him was he was like 6 feet 7 inches tall at 14 years of age. So he really stood out among the crowd. And the twins immediately adopted him, and he became the hero of their games and sports and things like that. His name was Otto. So if you'll remember Otto when you're reading my book, you'll know about him. They also, once they get to a steamboat going up the Missouri River, they meet another character, and he is a very proper British man. He's not with the Mormons. He's on his way to the Oregon Trail to go up to settle Oregon, see what's up there. And his name is Sir Evelyn Percy Towle III. Yes. And we call him Sir Evelyn. He has two English sheepdogs that he's traveling with, and the twins are naturally attracted to the animals, and they make friends with him, and he meets Lavinia, and Lavinia, remember, she's 6 feet tall, and her male interest is George Careless, who's the choir leader, and he's only 5'8", and so anyway, all of a sudden, this very prim and proper and very distinguished Sir Evelyn takes a liking to Lavinia. So she is quite amazed that she has two men that are sort of vying for her attention. So we have that little story going on there. We also meet along the way in the trains and the steamships, they run into soldiers that are forcing people to get off of the train so that they can travel on the train to go someplace else. They always took precedence with the soldiers. In the North, it was the Union soldiers. When they got farther south, down into Missouri, then the Confederate soldiers were the ones that were demanding that they get off whatever they were on so that they could travel on it. Anyway, So the steamships were the rivers were quite a good way to travel, because from the East Coast to the Mississippi River is very, very heavy with trees and foliage, and of course the fighting was going on there. So the rivers, if you got on a river, it would naturally just take you, it's like a little roadway, or only it was a riverway, to wherever you wanted to go, and it was a lot easier. So these steamships that were on the river were very popular, and people would ride on them all the time to go from one place to the other. And but it was kind of interesting, because in the journals it told about how the captains would come up to another steamship and then they would yell across and challenge them to a race. So then the two steamships would race up the river to a certain point, and this was very, very dangerous. The passengers loved it because it was so exciting, but it was very, very dangerous because the ships, some of them were older than others, and you know, you can't really see down into the water. You might run up against a rock or a submerged tree or something like that. So anyway, there is a little incident with the steamships that's quite interesting, with the two captains of these steamboats. Once they get to up the river, the Missouri River, to Omaha, they stop and let the saints out. And the saints have to wait there because the church has arranged to send a bunch of wagons with oxen driven by these teamsters from Utah to pick them up. The Mormon outfitting place is just 6 miles above where they stop, and so they come down and pick up the saints. What happened is the Brigham Young, the leader, the prophet of the church, president of the church at that time, got the idea that to save money, he would tell all the wards out in Utah to provide one wagon and a team of oxen and a couple of teamsters to go and drive out to Missouri, pick them up, or Omaha, excuse me, Nebraska, pick them up and then bring them back to Utah. This was just after the handcart companies. The handcart companies did pretty well for about 10 companies that came across, and then of course we had the Willie Martin disaster, and I think he decided that maybe they should try something a little bit different. So they would get these young boys between 15 and 30 or whatever to drive these teams out, and they loved it because it was like, you know, camping out and being with the boys and having a good time. And they also liked to kind of see the new girls that were coming across with the companies and see which ones they, you know, might want to court. So there was this little element of all these young teamsters and flirting with the girls, and the Seven Sisters, of course, are driven by one in their wagon, and his name is Mahonri Hurricane Clark. His name is really Mahonri Clark, but his nickname is Hurricane because he's from Hurricane, Utah. Not Hurricane, but Hurricane, Utah, because that's the way they say it down there. And so anyway, he kind of takes a little bit of shine to Caroline. And remember, Caroline is the one who is quite wealthy, but has never really had to work very hard in her life. And he teaches her how to drive the wagon. He teaches her how to shoot the gun. He teaches her how to crack a whip, and so forth. And so they have a fun relationship, and you'll really like Hurricane Clark. It's his name. So anyway, once they start across the plains, then of course you're going to run into Indians, friendly Indians and hostile Indians. And so we've got the Indians, we've got the mountain men, all kinds of manly men are in these books. And the mountain men, remember Sir Evelyn, he just idolizes these mountain men. He thinks they're so cool. And so he wants to be like a mountain man, and that also makes an interesting part of the story. So once they get closer to Utah, they kind of come to Fort Bridger, and here they learn the story of Jim Bridger, because he meets them and talks to them in their campfire, around their campfire, and tells them stories. And he's quite a colorful character, although he's not really a friend to the Mormons as such. So that's some more of the men in my second book, Seven Sisters, Overland Trek. I hope you will think about purchasing it for your Mother's Day or birthday gifts, and enjoy reading it yourself. And it's on Amazon.com. Thanks so much, and over and